Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to a new video. Today, I have a bit of a sad story for you guys. So if you read the title of this video, you already have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to talk about, but recently my main storage drive failed and I lost pretty much every project that I've worked on in 2020. So first, let me explain my sort of file system workflow, and then I'm going to tell you guys why it is so important to be backing your things up. So when I shoot a client job, the footage or photos I get from that job are A1 importance. The absolute most important thing is making sure that those files are safe. So what I do is I shoot an event or a video, whatever it is. I take all the SD cards and put them onto my external SSD. So all my active projects are always on my external SSD. Then once the footage is on that SSD, I leave it on those memory cards. I don't format those memory cards until I have a chance to back up the footage that's on the SSD. So I take that footage home, I back it up to my main drive as a backup, a second copy, and then I edit off of my SSD because it's an SSD and it's faster to edit off of. Then once that project is finished, I create an online version of it somehow through Google Drive or Dropbox, that kind of thing, and send it off to the client. And from that point, they have a digital version of it, and if my whole house burned down, it wouldn't matter because they still had the final product. Now, the problem with my system is what I do with all those finished projects. Basically, the root of the problem is this. Storage is expensive. So after I finish a project that I'm no longer actively working on, the client has already had it, or it's a YouTube video and it's already on YouTube, I move it from my SSD, which has 1 terabyte of space, to my external RAID drive, which has 8 terabytes of space. So a lot more, but it's also slower, so that's why I don't edit off of it. Now the only copy of that project is on my RAID drive. And for those who don't know, RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Drives. It's basically taking 3 hard drives and just combining them into one big hard drive with redundancy so that if one of those hard drives fails, I can swap it out and the other 2 drives can rebuild the data on that drive. Now this is great to protect against hard drive failure, but it is not the same as backing up your footage twice. This RAID storage box was already expensive enough. I didn't want to have to buy a second one in order just to back up my files onto it. So what I did was I used old external hard drives that I had lying around and put different pieces of my data on each one of those. So I had maybe 3 external hard drives that were holding backups of all the data on my RAID storage. And this worked fine, except those external hard drives were so extremely slow for copying files that I only backed up my main storage box about once or twice a year. So this brings us to present day. So the RAID controller on my external RAID failed. And the RAID controller is basically a mini computer inside my external RAID storage that organizes how the data is split up between those 3 drives. So technically all of my data is still on those drives, but now the only thing that could tell my computer how those files were organized is broken, which means all the files on there are useless. Now, yes, I could probably send it off to a data recovery place and pay like hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars to have them get all my data off of there, but I had like 90% of it backed up, so it just didn't seem worth it to me. But the last time I did back up my RAID storage was the 2020 New Year, so basically all of my files since the beginning of 2020 are now gone, except for the active projects I was working on because those were on my SSD, and everything that I had already sent off to clients or for school or for fun because those were all in the cloud somewhere. And this could have been easily prevented. All it would have cost was a little extra money and I wouldn't have lost anything because I would have a system where I back up almost all the time. Which brings me to my new main storage setup. So after my RAID storage broke, I decided I was never gonna let this happen again and painfully shelled out a lot of money for some new external hard drives. So I got 2 Lacy D2 Professional 10 terabyte hard drives. So between the 2 of them, it is 20 terabytes of storage, but I will never be using that full 20 terabytes because the only purpose of the second drive is to back up the first drive. So they're gonna sit right next to each other, both plugged in, and I'm going to put everything onto one drive, and then once a week, I'm going to copy all of those files that haven't been backed up onto the backup drive. And this way, the only way I'm gonna lose all my files is if like my house burns down, God forbid. Knock on some wood. So this doesn't change my storage workflow much. I'm still copying from the SD cards to my external SSD, editing off the external SSD, and then putting the finished project onto these big hard drives. Because again, they are hard drives and I want to try avoid editing off of them if I can, because they're just, SSDs are just so much better. But yeah, the only difference is now, after I back up onto my main storage drive on my desk, I'm going to be making a second copy of every single file over to my other drive. That way, if my main drive fails or I accidentally delete a file I didn't mean to, I'm going to have that backup available. And if I back up my files once a week, that means at the very most, I'm losing 1 week worth of projects that weren't even being worked on anymore, which I can handle. And that's really what it comes down to, is just the feeling of loss when you lose those files, because I didn't lose any money from losing those files. There wasn't any unfinished projects that I wish I could finish. Everything on that drive was done, and it was basically just an archive at this point. But it also means I'm never going to be able to go back and use that footage as an example in a future YouTube video, or to make some kind of like YouTube rewind video on my channel or something like that. I was actually really happy with how a lot of my content turned out this year, so it's kind of sad that the only version I have of it is the compressed version on YouTube, which I can still download if I really want to. But let my story be a lesson to you. It is not about if you are going to lose data, it's about when you're going to lose data. If you do this as a career or as a hobby long enough, eventually you're going to lose some photos or videos. And this, I'm not just talking about photographers and videographers. This goes for anyone storing digital files. So even if you just have a few hundred or a few thousand photos on your computer from photos you took on your phone, from vacation or like family photos, please back them up, because if you don't have 2 copies of something, eventually one of them is going to break and you are going to lose everything. So my advice to you would be, even though it sucks to spend basically double the money on a redundant storage system, please do it, because you never know what you're going to lose. And if my workflow was a little different, I could have lost projects that I was currently working on for people. I could have lost that money that I was going to make off those jobs, or I could have lost some important family photos. So don't be like me and back up your footage. That is my story of caution for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.